This video, I'm going to be going over refunds count and refunds total. So two very similar functions, but one is going to show you the units refunded and one is going to show you the total amount in dollar or your currency value refunded. So before starting, make sure that your add-on is installed, that it's been activated, and if your subscription ID does not save for whatever reason, make sure you do it in incognito mode to bypass Google's cache. Also, your seller nickname or your seller ID needs to be added into the Gorilla account. In this case, I'm using OAH. Obviously, that's not my Amazon store name, so you can call it whatever you want just to make it easier in the formula. And thirdly, if you're in Europe or if you're in a Spanish-speaking country, you're going to use semicolon in the formula instead of a comma. So to get the refunds count, start typing with refunds count. I've already loaded the ASINs in column A. So if you don't know how to use, let me pull that up. If you don't know how to use ASIN list or SKU list, then please refer to the documentation and the video on that. Going back to this, I'm going to pull in refunds. As I type it, you'll see these different functions show up. Select refunds count, and it's going to highlight each individual item to enter one at a time. It's very self-explanatory, so just follow whatever is highlighted in green. So the first one is seller ID or the seller nickname. I'm going to select A1, comma, or you could actually just say type it in manually, like say shoe store or t-shirt store or something. But since I want to keep it as dynamic as possible, where I use multiple drop-down lists and stuff so that I can just switch between accounts, I'm going to select A1, comma. For the period, I've got it in B1 today, so I'm going to click on that, comma. And then for the marketplace, I'm going to skip it because by default, it's going to show up as the US. But if you wanted to pull it in for, like, say, France, then you'll type in the country code in quotation marks or create another drop down. Okay, so skip that. For the SKU or the ASIN, same thing for us. I'm going to select from A2 all the way down to whatever the bottom is, and then comma. And then for the start date, I don't need a start date because I just want the today. And start date and end date is only used if you use a custom time period, where instead of today, if you type in custom, then it's going to know that it requires a start and an end date. Okay, close out this formula. It's going to load, and right now it's going to show me that there's no refunds today. Okay, now I could drag this formula to the right, but it's going to show a lot of errors because certain aspects, certain cells have not been locked into its position. So I don't want the A1, the name of the nickname, to be moving to the right each time I drag it to the right. I don't want the range of the SKUs or the cells to keep shifting to the right. I want to keep it at its exact position. So to do that, I'm going to click on A1, and now I'm going to press F4 on my keyboard, and it's going to automatically load in. I wonder if you can see that properly. It's going to enter these dollar signs, so that, which means that it's now going to lock that position in. It's not going to shift. It's not going to budge. Same thing on the range where all the ASINs are located. F4, that's going to lock that in. So I update that with an enter. Now if I drag it to the right, you'll see that the only thing that has shifted is now yesterday. Okay, the nickname and the range has stayed in its position, only the time period has shifted. I'm going to drag it all the way to the right to the end, and now I've created my table of the units refunded over the last whatever periods that I'm looking for. Now to do this in a static version, the concept is the same. Go into extensions, go into here, go into manage queries, and this sidebar is going to open up. So from the sidebar, select refunds count once it's fully loaded. Refunds count. There you go. And same thing. It's going to take you through a step-by-step process. In the formula, there was that green little bar that highlights each time, but here it's going to be a field. So in A1 is where my nickname is located. I could manually type it in, like say OAH, but to make it as dynamic as possible, I'm going to select A1. For the period, again, I don't want to just select today. You can if you're just doing a quick and simple spreadsheet, but I want to click on H1. So I'm going to change this to use cell reference and do H1. Okay, for the marketplace, I'm going to leave it empty. For the SKU range, again, you can, this time I'll show you, click on the icon. It's going to open up a box where now, based on whatever I've highlighted, it's going to update the range here. So from like A2 to A20. So I enter that in, okay, and that's going to do that. Again, you can do this manually by selecting manual and then just entering A2, not semicolon, colon A20. Set the refresh frequency. I'm going to change it to like say 6 hours. I'm going to uncheck this because I don't need a little checkbox to constantly try and manually refresh. I'm just going to trust that it's going to automatically update. And then if I select the cell H2, because this is important, you want to select the cell where the data is going to load. Okay, if I click on this and then insert the formula, all of the data is now going to start loading from this position. So I'm going to select H2, insert data, and there you go. So this is a formatting error, so I'm going to change this to 0. Okay, so 0, this should be, because it's 0, but I had it as a date for some reason. And now that's how to do the dynamic formula versus the static. So that's on the refunds count. Refunds total is exactly the same thing, except the only difference in the formula is changing from refunds count to refunds total. If I expand this down, you'll see that the sell ID, I've got it, the period, the marketplace, the SKU, everything remains the same. And that's why this is, you can pretty much just replace the word count with total, and it's going to update. Again, there's nothing here, but if I drag it to the right, you'll see some values show up in last 7 days. And there you go. You'll see that this was the amount of the refunds. If I want to change this formula into something else, I've got it loaded here, but rather than changing it directly here, that just means you're inserting a new formula. You have to press back, and then this is going to show you the existing formulas that I have at the moment. So if I want to change this from, say, a refunds count to refunds total, I'm going to click on this, edit, or you can just click on the formula. It's going to go into edit mode. And now, actually, you can't edit an existing static formula, only the inputs. So I would have to delete this formula in the static. That's going to wipe out all of the values, and then I'll do the same thing for refunds total. And now you just have to fill in the boxes again. So in this case, it's in A1. I know the period is I'm going to use a cell reference for H1. Okay, leave it blank, use cell reference here. I don't want to use manual because then that means I have to manually type in a SKU, but I want to do a range. So I'm going to use cell reference A2 to say A100. Okay, keep it at the daily refresh and then insert it. And you'll see all of the values populate. So that is how to use refunds count, refunds total on the dynamic and the static formulas.